On our anniversary night, he told her she was disgusting. Not in anger, not in private. He said it loud enough for every table to hear. The steak knives paused. Glasses trembled in midair. A hush swept through the room. Charles didn't blink. His words landed like stone on polished marble. Across from him, Amara did not shatter. She did not beg. She smiled. A small, steady curve that held back fire. A smile that belonged to someone who knew more than she showed. Whispers rippled. Eyes darted between the husband, proud and cruel, and the wife, calm and unreadable. Why smile at humiliation? Because humiliation was his weapon. And tonight, she had already disarmed him. This was not the collapse of her life. This was the first crack in his. The door closed behind her, sealing off the noise of the city. Inside, silence felt heavier than the insults she had just swallowed. Amara slipped off her coat and walked straight to the small study. On the desk sat a plain folder. A single word written in bold letters. Research. She opened it with steady hands. Pages fanned out. Bank statements highlighted in yellow, receipts circled in red, photographs clipped in neat rows. Every line, every number, every date told a story he thought she would never see. Against the wall, a timeline stretched across pinned notes and color markers. Transfers late at night. Luxury purchases under Evelyn Carter's name. A trail so obvious now, it almost mocked her. Her finger slid down the list. She whispered to herself, almost like a promise. I wasn't blind. I was patient. She placed a fresh page on top of the pile. The folder grew thicker. Evidence layered over evidence. Each sheet a shield she had built in silence. Amara leaned back, eyes fixed on the board. To anyone else it looked like numbers. To her, it was the truth taking shape. Tonight, he believed he had humiliated her, but here, in this room, the game was already shifting. The next morning, Amara sat across from a young banker in a crisp suit. Her folder rested on her lap, heavy with proof. She asked for a new line of credit in her own name. The banker smiled politely, but his words carried the same weight she had felt for years. We'll just need your husband's signature to proceed. Her jaw tightened. She leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting. That's not the law. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act protects my right to apply on my own. The banker blinked, unprepared. It's just standard procedure, ma'am. Amara's eyes did not move. Then your procedure is outdated. Run my application, without him. Silence stretched. Fingers tapped nervously on the keyboard. Finally, the printer whirred. A single page slid out, her name printed clearly across the top. Amara picked it up and pressed her thumb against the paper. A simple document, yet it felt like a declaration. She slipped it into her folder and stood. No smile, no farewell. Just steady steps out the door. Outside, the winter air bit at her skin, but her chest was lighter. For the first time in months, the power to move forward was hers. That evening, the house felt colder than usual. Amara sat at the kitchen table with a framed picture beside her. She and Celeste as little girls, braids and wide smiles. A reminder of where she came from and of who still stood by her. She dialed the number, pressing the phone tight against her ear. Amara? You sound tired. Celeste's voice carried warmth, the kind that reached through static. Amara swallowed hard. I'm fine, just long day. You don't sound fine. Her eyes drifted back to the photo. She traced the edge of the frame with her finger. Her throat tightened. Words felt heavy. Celeste waited, patient as always. You don't have to explain it all. Just let me in. Amara forced a breath. He humiliated me, in front of everyone. And still, he thinks I'll stay quiet. Silence on the other end, then Celeste spoke, steady and firm. You're stronger than his cruelty. You've always been. A tear slipped down Amara's cheek. She wiped it quickly, not wanting even her sister to hear it in her voice. Thank you, she whispered. I just needed to hear that. For a moment, the house didn't feel so empty. The buzz of dryers and the smell of hair oil filled the salon. Amara sat in the chair, cape draped around her shoulders, while women talked over each other in familiar rhythm. One leaned in, shaking her head. Men like that think money makes them untouchable. Another laughed softly. Please, I've seen worse. They brag loud, then cry when the receipts come out. Amara stayed quiet, listening, the heat of the dryer humming at her back. An older woman spoke from across the room, her voice cutting through the chatter. We don't chase them. We don't burn down what they built. We raise the price. That's how we win. The room fell silent for a beat, then heads nodded. We don't get even. We reset the value. Amara let the words settle in her chest. It wasn't revenge they were talking about. It was power, reclaimed. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were tired, but something stronger lingered there. The women moved on, laughing again, swapping stories about kids and bills, but that one line stayed with her, louder than all the rest. She whispered it under her breath, almost like a vow. We raise the price. Late at night, the house was still. Amara carried the thick folder into her bedroom closet. At the back, hidden behind boxes, a small steel safe waited. She crouched down, punched in the code, and the lock clicked open. Inside, neat stacks of documents already lined the shelves. Statements, contracts, photographs. Evidence she had been gathering piece by piece. Amara placed the new folder on top, pressing it flat with her hand. For a moment she kept her palm there, steady, as if sealing her own future inside the metal. She rose slowly, shutting the door with a final slam. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. The faint light cast shadows upward, cutting across her face, sharpening every line. Her eyes no longer looked tired. They looked cold, certain. The kind of look that warned the storm had already started. For the first time she wasn't carrying the weight. She was holding the weapon. Alone in the silence, she whispered a single line to herself. He thinks I'm cornered. He has no idea. The safe stood locked, silent but full, and Amara stood taller than before, the weight no longer crushing her but making her unshakable. The office smelled of leather and paper. Harold Green sat across the desk, glasses low on his nose, flipping through Amara's folder. Each page made his brow rise a little higher. "You've been thorough," he said. "Bank records, transfers, even dates that match with Carter's trips. This isn't suspicion. This is evidence." Amara folded her hands in her lap. "I didn't collect it to wonder. I collected it to win." Green leaned back, considering her words. "Then we move carefully. Divorce first, asset division second. And once he feels cornered, we press the financial misconduct. He won't see it coming." She nodded, steady. "I don't want his name. I don't want his pity. I want what's mine, and I want the truth on record." Green's voice softened. "Most people panic when they sit in this chair. You already know the battlefield." Amara met his gaze without blinking. "Because I've been living in it for years." He closed the folder and slid it toward her. "Then let's prepare for the fight. Timing is everything." Amara picked it up, her grip firm. For the first time, she didn't feel like a client waiting for rescue. She felt like a partner drawing the map of war. The lounge buzzed with laughter, cigars glowing in crystal ashtrays. Charles leaned back in a leather chair, whiskey glass balanced in his hand. Around him, a circle of men in tailored suits nodded like disciples. He smirked. "She likes to think she built something. Truth is, Amara never made a dime without me. Not one. Everything she touches comes from my name." The men chuckled, raising glasses. One added, "That's how it is. They marry up, then act like they're equals." Charles grinned wider. "Equals? She should be grateful she even sits at my table." The laughter grew louder, echoing against marble walls. None of them noticed the irony, how the empire he bragged about was now under review, every number already in Amara's folder. He drank deep, convinced he was untouchable. His voice carried the arrogance of class, the comfort of old money. "Without me," he declared, "she's nothing." But, far from the lounge, in the quiet of her home, Amara's hands were turning those very receipts into chains. Not for her, for him. The room celebrated his pride, and unknowingly, his pride was already writing his downfall. The cafe was quiet, the kind of place where whispers carried. Amara stood in line when she noticed a man at the corner table, head bent over his coffee. His profile struck her, familiar from old photographs. Marcus Lee, Evelyn's ex-fiancé. For a moment, doubt crept in. Approaching him felt risky, but silence was riskier. She walked over, steady steps on tiled floor. "Marcus?" Her voice low, cautious. He looked up, surprised. "Amara Johnson." A pause, then a dry laugh. "Didn't think we'd ever meet without her pulling strings." Amara pulled out the chair. "I'm not here by accident. I think we want the same thing." His eyes narrowed. "Truth?" She nodded. "She plays games. He covers for her, and I'm done letting them decide the story." Marcus leaned back, measuring her. For years he'd carried his own betrayal, and in Amara's tone he recognized the same wound. Finally, he set his cup down. "Then maybe it's time we stop playing defense." Mara's grip tightened on the folder in her lap. Two people burned by the same fire. Now, together, willing to turn the flames back on the ones who lit it. The office was dim, only the glow of the laptop lighting Amara's face. She scrolled through a chain of emails, her pulse steady, eyes sharp. Then, one line stopped her cold. If the numbers leak, we blame the wife. She's greedy and she's black. People will believe it. The words stared back at her, vile and casual. Not just betrayal, calculated prejudice, typed without hesitation. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't gasp or curse. She reached for the printer. The machine hummed, spitting out the page. Each word in black ink felt heavier than the last. She lifted the paper and smoothed it flat on the desk. Her hand lingered at the corner, holding it steady. No shaking, no fear. "This," she whispered, "is enough to bury them." Amara slipped the sheet into her folder, aligning it with the others. The collection was no longer just about money, it was proof of injustice, written in their own voices. She closed the laptop, the screen going dark. In the silence, her reflection looked back at her. Tired, but unbroken. They thought they could erase her. Tonight, she held the evidence that would erase them. The boutique smelled of perfume and leather. Amara walked slowly past glass cases, her heels clicking against polished floors. A saleswoman smiled politely, but behind her a security guard trailed every step. She paused at a display. The guard stopped too, close enough to shadow her reflection in the glass. Amara turned, voice calm but edged with steel. "Are you planning to follow me through the whole store?" The guard stiffened. "Just doing my job, ma'am." Her gaze didn't waver. "Your job is security, not profiling, not harassment." The manager rushed over, apologizing in rehearsed tones. "We're very sorry, Miss Johnson. He didn't mean—" Amara cut her off. "Don't apologize to me. Change the policy that makes men like him think I don't belong here." The words landed heavy. The manager opened her mouth, then closed it again. Mara set the handbag she had been holding back on the counter. "I can buy anything in this store, but I don't need to buy respect." She walked out, head high, folder clutched against her side. Behind her, the boutique gleamed with wealth. But it looked smaller now, like a cage she had already broken free from. Night after night, the desk filled with paper. Amara sat beneath a single lamp, her pen moving in sharp strokes. Bank statements stacked in columns. Credit card bills spread across the wood. She circled transactions in red. Jewelry purchases timed to Evelyn's trips. Wire transfers hidden under shell accounts. Hotel bookings filed as business expenses. Each page slipped into a folder. The folders grew heavy, stacked one over the other. What began as a thin file was now a fortress of evidence. Her eyes scanned every line, searching for patterns. She clipped photographs of receipts. She taped dates onto a calendar. Lines connected across the wall like a web, each thread pulling tighter. At times her hand trembled, but she forced it steady. This wasn't grief anymore, it was building, preparing. She stopped only to press her palm against the growing pile. Dozens of sheets layered together, the weight undeniable. To him, the lies were routine. To her, they were proof, collected piece by piece, night after night. By the time she closed the last folder, the study no longer felt like a room. It felt like a vault, and she was ready to open it when the moment came. The conference room smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. Charles adjusted his tie as two auditors entered, briefcases snapping open on the table. "Mr. Whitman," one began, laying down a thick binder, "we'll be reviewing the last 3 fiscal years. Random sampling, of course." Charles forced a smile. "Of course." His hand gripped the armrest a little too tight. Pages flipped. Numbers were read aloud. Dates cross-checked. Each question seemed harmless, but sweat formed at his temple. He dabbed it quickly with a handkerchief. "Can you explain these transfers?" the auditor asked, sliding a page toward him. Charles leaned forward, voice strained. "Business development expenses." The auditor's brow lifted. "All in cash? Repeated every quarter?" He cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. "Standard practice." The room grew smaller with each minute. Tick, 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 tick. The wall clock loud against the silence. His smile faltered, his cuff damp from wiping sweat. Outside those glass walls, employees moved like normal. Inside, Charles felt the floor tilting beneath him. What he called confidence was unraveling. And somewhere far from the boardroom, Amara already knew this was the countdown he could not escape. The papers slid across the clerk's counter with a soft thud. Amara's signature stood bold on every page. Petition for divorce, request for asset division. The stamp came down hard, marking the date. The timing was no accident. That same afternoon, Charles was still reeling from the auditors when his phone buzzed. A notification lit the screen. Petition for dissolution of marriage. His eyes widened. His breath caught. He read the words again, unable to believe she had done it first. When Amara walked through the door that evening, he was waiting. The papers crumpled in his hand. "You think you can walk away from me?" His voice shook with fury. Amara set down her keys, calm as stone. "I already did." He slammed the documents on the table. "Do you have any idea what this will cost me?" Her eyes met his, unwavering. "Everything you stole, and more." The room pulsed with his rage. But Amara didn't flinch. The petition wasn't just ink on paper, it was her line in the sand, drawn at the exact moment his empire began to crumble. For Charles, it felt like betrayal. For Amara, it was freedom finally in motion. The phone rang late, its sharp tone cutting through the quiet house. Amara glanced at the screen. Charles. She let it ring once, twice, then answered. His voice exploded through the line. "You think you're clever? Filing behind my back? You'll regret this, Amara. I will destroy you." Her face remained still, eyes fixed on the folder beside her. She let his words burn out in the silence. Finally, she spoke. Calm, even, ice. "I don't take threats. From now on, you'll speak to my lawyer." There was a pause, then his laugh, harsh, brittle. "You think Harold Green can protect you? You're nothing without me." Amara's voice didn't rise. "You already taught me what it feels like to have nothing, and I survived." His breath hitched on the other end, rage searching for a target. She ended the call before he found another word. For a moment, she sat in the silence, the dial tone gone. Her hand was steady on the phone, her chest steady too. The conversation had been short, but it marked the shift. He screamed. She refused. He threatened. She dismissed. The power between them had finally changed hands. The study door slammed shut behind him. Charles paced the floor, jacket half undone, sweat at his temples. Amara stood near the desk, folder open, her silence pressing against him harder than any words. He stopped suddenly, voice breaking under the weight. "Fine. You want the truth? I moved the money, 300,000, gone." Amara's eyes narrowed. He stumbled closer, hands shaking. "I had no choice. Deals fell apart. Evelyn needed cover. His voice cracked. "I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed." For a long moment she said nothing, just stared, letting his confession hang like smoke in the air. Finally she asked, soft but cutting, 300,000, Charles. Did you ever stop to think what that would cost me?" He couldn't answer. His mouth opened, then closed. The weight of silence buried him deeper than her words ever could. Amara slid a single page across the desk. His signature, his transfer, his guilt in black ink. The confession had left his lips, but it was her calm, her control that made it feel like a verdict. Charles stood frozen, his confession still echoing in the quiet. Papers lay scattered on the desk, but Amara's eyes weren't on the numbers. They were on him. Her voice came low, steady, but charged with something heavier than anger. "You didn't just steal money, Charles." She paused, the words catching in her throat. A single tear slipped free. "You stole trust." The silence that followed cut sharper than shouting. Charles shifted, searching for a defense, but there was none. The number in the bank account could be replaced. The faith she once carried in him could not. Amara wiped her cheek, but her gaze never broke. 300,000 is a figure. What you took from me can't be counted. He reached out as if to close the distance, but she stepped back, leaving his hand hanging in the air. Her tear was the only crack in her composure, yet it landed harder than all her evidence. In that moment, Charles realized the damage wasn't in the loss of money, it was in the loss of her belief that he had ever been worth loving, and nothing could buy that back. The night pressed heavy against the windows, but Amara's study glowed with sharp light. She gathered the last set of documents from the desk, aligning the corners before sliding them into the folder. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried. Each page sealed another layer of truth. Each folder stacked into something larger than survival. It was a weapon waiting for its moment. She knelt in front of the safe, its steel door already open. Rows of evidence stared back at her, neatly arranged, undeniable. She placed the folder on top, her hand firm against it. For a beat, she held it there, as if pressing her past into the box. Then her fingers turned the lock. The dial clicked. The handle snapped shut. The lamp above cast a sharp beam across her face. Shadows cut high on her cheekbones, making her eyes burn with cold resolve. She stood slowly, back straight, chin raised. The silence of the room felt different now, not empty, but waiting. The safe sat sealed, silent but alive. Amara exhaled, steady and final. Whatever storm was coming, she had already prepared its lightning. The next move would not belong to Charles. It would belong to her. The morning news broke like thunder. Screens across the city flashed with the headline, "Financier Charles Whitman arrested." Reporters' voices spilled out, urgent and clipped. Federal investigators confirmed the charges include fraud, embezzlement, and concealment of assets totaling over $300,000. Footage rolled. Charles in a pressed suit, hair slicked back, wrists locked in cold steel. Cameras swarmed as agents guided him down courthouse steps. He kept his chin high, but the sweat on his temples betrayed him. Shutters clicked. Microphones pushed forward. "Mr. Whitman, did your wife know? Did Evelyn Carter help you?" The questions came fast, each one a strike. His eyes darted. No answer. Only the tightening of his jaw. At home, Amara watched from the living room, the sound of the cuffs snapping shut echoing louder than the anchor's voice. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply folded her arms and stood tall, letting the image sink in. For years, he had lived untouchable, wrapped in wealth and arrogance. Now the whole world saw what she had always known. His empire wasn't built on strength. It was built on lies. And the mask had finally cracked in public. The morning after the arrest, Evelyn's apartment sat eerily quiet. The doorman swore she left in the middle of the night with only one suitcase. Neighbors said they heard heels on the stairs, then nothing. Inside, the rooms looked staged, as if she had planned the exit long before. Closet doors hung open, shelves half empty. Perfume bottles lined the counter like props in a play. On the dining table, one envelope waited. Amara found it hours later, slipped to her by an investigator. Her name written in bold strokes across the front. She unfolded the note, the handwriting sharp and precise. "You think you won, Amara. But this was never about love or money. It was a game, and you were only one of the pieces." No signature, just a single lipstick mark pressed at the bottom, crimson against white. Amara read the words twice, then folded the page neatly back into the envelope. Her face gave nothing away, but her eyes hardened. Evelyn hadn't vanished out of fear. She had vanished on her own terms. The mystery wasn't where she had gone. It was what she planned to do next. The storm didn't take long to hit. News outlets buzzed with screenshots plastered across their screens. Messages from a supposed account under Amara's name. The texts were sharp, ugly, dripping with arrogance. "Of course I knew about the transfers. I deserved every cent. Charles was weak enough to cover me." On social media, hashtags multiplied. Comment threads filled with doubt. Some believed, some defended. But the seed had been planted. Amara sat in her study, the folder of evidence in front of her, as reporters replayed the supposed scandal on loop. Every message designed to turn her from victim into accomplice. Marcus called, his voice tight. She forged it. Fake accounts, fake trails, but the public doesn't wait for proof. Amara leaned back, jaw set. She knew Evelyn's style. This was her, a trap crafted with precision. The cruel genius wasn't just in the fraud. It was in how easily people wanted to believe it. For Amara, the choice was clear. Survival meant strategy. And silence was no longer an option. The courtroom was tense, every eye fixed on the front. Charles's lawyer rose, pacing with deliberate steps. He gestured toward Amara, his voice dripping with disdain. "Members of the court, what we see here is not a victim. This is a bitter, angry woman, a wife scorned, desperate to destroy her husband's reputation." He paused, letting the words hang. "And we all know the type. Loud, emotional, impossible to reason with. The so-called angry black woman." A ripple moved through the room. Charles smirked at the jab, convinced it had landed. But before the lawyer could continue, the judge's gavel cracked down hard. "Enough." The word cut through the chamber. The judge leaned forward, voice sharp. "This court will not tolerate stereotypes paraded as arguments. Address the evidence, not character assassinations rooted in prejudice." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. The lawyer stammered, flipping his notes, suddenly unsteady. Amara sat tall, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She hadn't spoken a word, but the tide had shifted. For years, she had been forced to swallow those labels. Today, in this courtroom, someone else had silenced them for her, and that silence carried the weight of justice. The basement lab hummed with the low buzz of computers. Screens lit the walls, lines of code flickering like secret maps. Marcus stood over one monitor, while a small group of Amara's college alumni, graduates from their HBCU, now forensic analysts, leaned in with sharp focus. "Look here," one said, pointing at a timestamp buried in the file. "The messages Evelyn leaked? Metadata shows they were created 2 weeks after the supposed dates." Another zoomed in on an IP address. "All routed through a proxy, but trace the origin." Fingers flew across the keyboard. "There. Not Amara's system. Not even the same state." Marcus exhaled, relief breaking across his face. "She built the whole thing out of smoke." One of the analysts smirked, "and left fingerprints all over her smoke." They compiled a report, layering screenshots, metadata trails, server logs. Each detail stitched together a clear picture, false evidence, manufactured with precision, but sloppy enough to expose its maker. Marcus snapped the folder shut. "This is it. The story turns tonight." Far from the courtroom, Amara's allies had carved out truth from code. The fake walls Evelyn built were already crumbling, digit by digit, line by line. The cameras swarmed outside the hotel lobby, their flashes bouncing off glass doors. Evelyn stepped out first, wrapped in a tailored red coat, her chin lifted as if she were still on a runway. But the agents closed in fast. Hands firm, voices clipped. "Evelyn Carter, you are under arrest for fraud and obstruction of justice." She froze, eyes darting between the microphones and the badges. For a second she smirked, as if this too were part of her game. Then the cuffs clicked. The sound was sharp, metallic. The lenses zoomed in, not on her face, but on her wrists. The bright red sleeve pulled back just enough for the steel to bite through. Reporters shouted, hungry for her downfall. She didn't answer. She only pressed her lips tight, walking stiffly as the world recorded every step. Behind the noise, one image cut through louder than words, the contrast of polished crimson fabric against cold silver cuffs. For years she had worn red like a weapon, a symbol of power and allure. Now, under the glare of flashing lights, it marked her as captured. The game she declared was hers had ended, and this time she wasn't the one setting the rules. The press room pulsed with light and noise, cameras stacked shoulder to shoulder. Amara sat at the podium, hands steady on the microphone. Reporters called her name, voices overlapping in a storm of questions. Then one rose above the chaos. A black woman journalist, notebook in hand, eyes sharp with recognition. She leaned forward. "Amara," she said, voice clear. "So many doubted you until the evidence surfaced. How did you know to keep going? What kept you from breaking when the world painted you as the villain?" The room fell quiet, waiting. Mara drew a slow breath. Her gaze swept the crowd, then landed back on the woman who asked. "Because instinct is evidence. A black woman's intuition," she said, her voice low but certain, "is living data. We read silence, we read shifts in the room, we read lies dressed as love, and we trust what we know, even when no one else does." The words cut through the flashing lights, stronger than any headline. The journalist nodded, writing fast, her own smile quiet but proud. For the first time, Amara wasn't speaking only for herself. She was giving language to the power so many had lived, but rarely heard named aloud. The letter arrived on embossed stationery, the seal of the city's oldest country club stamped in gold. Amara unfolded it slowly, scanning the polished words. "We are pleased to extend an invitation for membership." She almost laughed. The same place that once looked through her, the same halls where she had been followed by eyes that measured her skin before her worth. Now they wanted her to join. Later, on the phone, a board member tried to sweeten the offer. "It's a gesture, Mrs. Johnson. A chance to belong among the city's most established families." Amara's voice was calm, even warm, but edged with steel. "I don't buy tickets to places that never wanted to see me. My dignity isn't for sale." There was silence on the other end. No counteroffer, no words left. She hung up gently, placed the letter back in its envelope, and set it aside. Outside, children laughed on the street, running free in the late afternoon sun. Their joy rang louder than any club's approval. For Amara, the choice wasn't rejection. It was freedom. She didn't need their gate to validate her worth. She had already built her own. The conference room was quiet except for the faint shuffle of papers. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, catching the edges of the divorce decree laid out before Amara. Her lawyer slid the pen across the table. "This finalizes everything. The house, the accounts, the assets, you retain control. Once you sign, it's done." Amara stared at the page for a moment, tracing her eyes over the words that once would have felt impossible. For years, this house had been her cage. Now it was her ground, steady beneath her. She picked up the pen, her hand firm. One clean stroke. Then another. Her name sealed the line. Charles's signature was already there, jagged and reluctant, like a man forced to surrender. Amara leaned back, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The sound of the papers being stacked felt final, like the closing of a door. Her lawyer smiled softly. "Congratulations." But Amara didn't celebrate. She simply gathered the documents, slid them into her bag, and rose. The victory wasn't in wealth. It was in ownership of her home, her life, her future. Walking out of the room, she felt lighter than she had in years. The office smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Boxes were stacked in corners, wires still coiled on desks, but at the center of the room stood a sleek glass sign. Johnson Research and Risk. Amara ran her fingers over the logo, the bold lettering etched in black and silver. It was more than a name. It was her claim, her proof that she could build something lasting from the rubble. A small team gathered around her, people she had chosen carefully. Analysts, researchers, young women who had once been overlooked in boardrooms. Their eyes lit with the same determination she carried. "We're not just crunching numbers," Amara told them. Her voice filled the room, steady and alive. "We're building protection. For communities, for women who aren't heard, for anyone told their instincts don't matter. Here, data tells the truth, and we make sure no one can bury it." The team nodded, scribbling notes, their energy rising like the hum of the computers powering up. She turned back to the sign once more. Johnson Research and Risk. It wasn't just a company. It was her freedom, her weapon, her legacy, launched not with permission but with power she had claimed for herself. The screen filled with light and movement, snapshots of change unfolding. A young mother sat across from Amara's team, relief breaking over her face as she learned how to protect her savings from predatory lenders. A warm handshake sealed the meeting, dignity returned in quiet ways. Cut to a conference table where women of color leaned in, listening intently as Johnson Research and Risk analysts explained risk strategies, their notebooks filled, their confidence rising with every word. The scene shifted to a high school auditorium. A nervous girl stepped onto the stage, clutching an envelope. When her name was called for a scholarship funded by Amara's foundation, her hands shook, her eyes wide with disbelief. The applause swelled, her family crying in the front row. The montage continued. Laughter in workshops, hands raised in classrooms, contracts signed without fear. Faces glowed with something deeper than relief. They glowed with possibility. Through it all, Amara's presence lingered, sometimes at the head of a table, sometimes in the back of a room, always steady. The world she had built from betrayal was now building others. The message was clear. Survival had become impact. Her pain had been recycled into hope, and that hope was multiplying. The world once told her to wait, to stay quiet, to shrink herself until she fit into spaces never built for her. But Amara had learned the cost of silence. She had carried betrayal, survived humiliation, and turned loss into fuel. Now she stood in her truth, unshaken. Her voice was steady, her words deliberate. "I became my own rescue. And I will never ask permission to live, to love, to dream." It was not anger. It was clarity, a declaration carved from every battle she had endured. Her journey was proof. Dignity cannot be stolen, power can be reclaimed, and freedom begins the moment you stop asking for it. This is more than her story. It belongs to anyone who has been underestimated, dismissed, or told they don't belong. If her fight spoke to something inside you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe in voices like Amara's, stay with us. There are more stories to tell. Her chapter closes here, but the message lives on. Survival is only the beginning. The rest is yours to claim.